I've done several reviews of indie games on Steam, lots of them horrible, and in response to these reviews, I've had several people write in and say, "See, all this shit is why I'm not on Steam." That's not entirely fair. Steam is a place where hack developers can unload their wares on a relatively mainstream audience, but it's also a place where actual talented people can sell games that are shunned by the mainstream gaming industry, a place where games other than shooter sequels and bland open-world games get a chance to shine. So in addition to regaling you with tales of hilariously bad games from total crap sacks, I thought it'd be nice to highlight a good game every now and then hiding in Steam's mountainous library, and I thought I'd start with Gunmetal. This new mentality, of course, has nothing at all to do with the fact that I kinda had to review a good game after one was donated to me. Gunmetal is a third-person shooter where you play as a giant robot that can transform into a jet fighter. The game has nothing in the way of actual story, you're just a member of some military that's fighting some other military because reasons, I guess? Neither side is ever explained aside from the briefing stating that you're fighting Earth forces and you're on some planet called Helios, but you're a giant robot that can transform into a jet fighter. What more do you need? Unlike most Transformers-style games, the jet form is not just your means of traversing the level. Each mode has its own arsenal of weapons, and each has simple, intuitive controls that make it a piece of cake to use in combat. Each form is equally viable for combat, and gameplay revolves around strategically switching forms to take out enemies and protect targets however you see fit. The robot form has shields, and it's easier to focus fire on an enemy, but it relies on the shields to survive combat due to its restricted mobility. The jet form is fast enough to evade enemy fire and can cross the map in seconds, making it perfect for hit-and-run tactics, but it's not great for enemies with a ton of health since, well, it's hard to focus fire on something as you're flying past it. Each form has both anti-ground and anti-aircraft weaponry, so there's usually no one correct way to play the game. You're dropped into a map with a ton of enemies, and you just kill them however you can. There's no hand-holding or railroading, just a batch of enemies to kill and a shitload of guns to kill them with. How you get there is totally up to you. There's a great variety to the enemies and the levels. Enemy consists of fighters, bombers, troop transports, gunships, tanks with a ton of firepower, turrets, and a few different kinds of motherships that you have to destroy one piece at a time, destroying said pieces in any order you wish, whether you choose to take out the turrets or hangars first. Levels have you taking on hordes of ships and tanks, invading enemy bases, blasting through canyons, taking out mines, and scouting out bases, and of course, the universally dreaded escort missions. There's a level where you have to escort a convoy to a group of entrenched enemies, and there are several levels where you have to protect cities from fleets and motherships. But the game has a staggering innovation of escort missions that don't suck! Pretty much every object you're supposed to protect or escort has a ton of health, and enemies have to actually travel to objectives. They don't just spawn from thin air. If an objective is under attack, you're given plenty of warning, you're given plenty of time to head back to the objective, you're given plenty of time to clear out the enemies, and if you catch the enemies moving in ahead of time, you can scout ahead and kill the advancing wave early. In other words, you don't get an instant game over for not instinctively killing all the enemies in the 10 seconds between them spawning and your objective blowing up. Looking at you, Rogue Squadron! Truth be told, you're vastly more powerful than the enemies, and a lot of levels are more or less pure destruction derbies of you pulverizing waves of cannon fodder enemies. The escort missions and goals are really only there to give the game some kind of structure, i.e. blow everything up, but do it in this general area and try not to drag your feet about it. Gunmetal is not designed to force you to play the game any one specific way. It's designed for freedom and to just let you have some fun blowing shit up. Both the plane and the jet have a lot of health, but they have just little enough health that you still have to put actual effort and strategy into the game. Weapons have a lot of ammo so that you can actually play around with them, but not so much that you can just spray missiles everywhere. You still have to use them strategically. Each mode has an interchangeable weapon that has unlimited ammo, and the unlimited ammo weapons actually deal good damage, so you're never paranoid about running out of weapons or stuck having to cross the level to get more ammo. You can always make do with that basic gun. Even the controls are super simple, customizable, and still intuitive if you're using a controller. You fly the plane using the mouse cursor both to aim and steer, which makes it super easy to aim at enemies, and it isn't jarring at all to switch over from the robot form. The game opts for fun and simplicity rather than trying to force in realistic flight controls and physics that you have to wrestle with. I've been thrown a few times by the fact that the left and right WASD keys use barrel rolls when I feel like they should do a hard turn, but this is just a minor quirk. Besides, you can hold either of the side movement keys down to continuously barrel roll and circle strafe enemies while still in the jet form. This shit is awesome!
Do a barrel roll! 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 Do a barrel roll!
It's downright ridiculous how many weapons the game has. Each form has 4 weapon slots, plus its own supply of homing missiles, meaning that at any given time your character is packing 10 distinct weapons. It's like a Rob Liefeld wet dream. and there are 3 separate weapons that can be equipped to each weapon slot. There's a great variety to the weapons, as both modes have mixes of anti-aircraft and anti-ground weapons, plus long and short-range weapons and quick/light versus slow/heavy weapons. You can customize your loadout to tailor both modes to your playstyle. I tended to load up the airplane mode with the heavy basic weapon and focus on anti-aircraft secondary weapons, while I kept the robot equipped with anti-ground weapons since tanks and landing craft require concentrated fire. The variety is great, but going through the game's inventory, it makes your head spin trying to keep track of all the different weapons. I didn't find all the weapons particularly useful no matter how I used them. The ground bomb doesn't track enemies and you generally have no idea where it will hit. The game outright says the Gauss gun is the best weapon in the game, but it's easy to miss, doesn't do much damage, and it scatters beams everywhere, but they spread out too far to hit what you were aiming at. Some of the weapons are functionally just more powerful versions of previous weapons, which adds unnecessary clutter to the inventory, and a few weapons like the torpedo, assault cannon, and the exploding disc barely seem to do anything to their targets. Grenades have such a piddly-ass arc that it's hard to aim and use them effectively, and the napalm is tough to aim because it goes straight in a plane that's always turning and aiming elsewhere. Trying to keep track of all the weapons isn't helped by the fact that weapon descriptions barely give you any idea what a given weapon does. But for every quasi-useless weapon, there's another that's an epic blast to use. The Trident fires 3 spiraling missiles that jack up whatever you point them at. The ion beam has a short range, but it just obliterates whatever it touches. The flat gun foobars anything that's in close range. The Phoenix is this plane-mounted shotgun that just lets you fly into a mothership and take out a whole cluster of turrets at once. Both the plane and the robot have a weapon that fires a whole wave of missiles along the ground, wiping out tanks. The rocket replaces your jet's basic gun with missiles just pile damage onto any slow-moving target from far away. And the Photon Storm fires out 8 or 10 homing lasers that can't be dodged. There's a lot of weapons that are just endless fun to rain some pain down on a bastard. My complaints with the game are nitpicks. While I praise the game's variety, stages 11 and 12 felt very tedious to play through. Both of these levels you have to take out 4 enemy bases, and stage 12 runs on time limits that you aren't privy to until they start to run out. Every base is full of hangars that deploy a constant stream of tanks and fighters, plus laser turrets positioned everywhere, plus missile stations that launch mission-ending warheads if you don't target them first. Every one of these bases is a total maelstrom of enemy firepower that I can't even show to you because trying to record these stages sank the frame rate, though I have to say I never had slowdowns in the game when I wasn't recording. Skill will help you survive longer, but there is no taking out these bases without taking a shit ton of damage. You have to fly to a base, take out whatever you can before your health reaches the danger zone, hurry back to the start to heal up, and then take another pass, which will probably require running home to heal 2 or 3 more times. These hit-and-run levels are a great dose of variety, and they contribute a lot to the difficulty curve. It's just tedious constantly running back and forth between the base to take out a few enemies and the start of the stage to heal from the inescapable Hellfire of Bullets. I've had a few what the hell just killed me moments. I've tried to transform near a battleship to get down to ground level and get out of a hail of fire and just died instantly every time that I've tried it. Several levels are built out of canyons and the game uses one-shot kill laser turrets to force you to fly through them instead of over them, but this leads to times where you just explode immediately because you flew slightly over the imaginary invisible flight ceiling. Plus stage 12 puts one of these guns near ground level just to screw with you if you don't see it coming. Level 13 revolves around you trying to bring down a shield. If you touch the shield, you die. Makes sense, but you also die if you get anywhere close to the shield with no prompting or chance to recover. It's like there's an invisible shield around the shield. But these are all minor complaints. The only big issue I have with the game is, my eyes! My eyes! It's like staring into the void! If you fly in any direction remotely facing the sun, the entire screen whites out and you can't see dick. Don't pilots have some kind of visor that stops this exact thing from happening? Or has this planet not invented sunglasses yet? Level 13 is one of the most awesome things ever. You have to destroy a portal and permanently cut off the enemy fleet before the fleet breaks through it. But the gate is protected by shields, which are protected by more shields, which are protected by hangars that launch a huge army of fighters and tanks, plus turret placements and enemies that fly in to reinforce the base. This level also has no re-energizer, which most levels have this little statue that replenishes your health if you stand near it. So you don't get any additional health in this level. It's this huge, frantic, balls-to-the-wall battle as you basically have to nuke everything on the map while being careful not to lose too much health, constantly assessing any nearby enemies and strategically using your weapons to clear out threats as soon as they become threats. It's like 7 minutes straight of pure chaos and hectic combat, and it is ridiculously fun. This really should have been the final boss because, trust me, soloing a huge set of bases under a time crunch with reinforcements as a huge fleet starts spawning with no extra health, you're not gonna top that. The real final level, which comes right afterward, has you taking out the stragglers of the enemy fleet to end the war for good, which I get from a narrative perspective to add closure, but it's a big step down in stakes and scope to finish out the game. This level, you just have to blow up a mothership while making sure its tanks and fighters don't threaten the base. A piece of cake. You've done this a half dozen times up to this point. But then the level doesn't end, and a second mothership spawns, and this one has a humongous laser cannon, so you have to kill it fast before it reaches the city. Again, piece of cake, especially with the Jetform's rockets. But then the level still doesn't end, and 2 more motherships spawn. They land, and they deploy a shit ton of tanks and fighters. It takes several bombing runs to take out the motherships because they cover each other with a ton of cannons, and you have to keep breaking off to keep the fighters and tanks away from the base. But you finally do it, that's got to be it, but no! Another 2 cannon motherships spawn, and you have to kill both of them before they reach the city, and you have to start this 15-minute level over again. It's just annoying because the game keeps yanking your chain going, one more thing! And the stage feels like it goes on forever. And please God, somebody tell me they got the Jackie Chan Adventures reference. Gunmetal is a hell of a fun third-person shooter with a kick-ass gimmick. It controls great, the game design actively avoids pissing you off, and it's just a blast to play. I highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out yet. And now I'm left with only one question. Is there any chance these guys can work on the next Transformers game?